Minneapolis and St. Paul. My name is Abby Maloney, and I'm the president and CEO of Capital Analytics. Welcome to the launch of our inaugural Invest Minneapolis-St. Paul report, an in-depth analysis of what makes the region tick, where are the opportunities, and what challenges lie ahead. Thank you all for being here today. In doing the initial research for our report, we knew that the region was home to the country's highest concentration of Fortune 500 companies, and that it is a major healthcare hub given the proximity to the Mayo Clinic, and that most certainly it is on the radar for business relocations. We could mention Prince or the fact that Bob Dylan went to college there, but not today. Throughout our conversations with leading voices from both the public and private sectors, many of whom are joining us here today, we learned the essence of what makes the Twin Cities region a desirable place to work, live, and play. First is the Midwestern work ethic that permeates the region. It's a place where people like to work together and get things done. With its lakes and multiple parks and green spaces, it also boasts a natural outdoor beauty that during these times of the pandemic has been essential. Unlike many of its peer cities, it remains affordable, especially in housing. From cultural elements to dynamic sports landscape to a vibrant entertainment scene, there is a high quality of life here that is gaining appeal, as evidenced by the increasing in-migration into both the urban areas as well as the suburban areas. Economically, the region is emerging from the pandemic in a position of strength. An increasing focus on tech and innovation and its expanding healthcare sector, both of which will be discussed today, are helping the greater MSP area on growth footing. The data proves the point. Gross regional product is on the rise. Its labor force participation rate is ranked #1 amongst peer cities, and the total number of jobs generating in the area is climbing. Of course, there are challenges that need to be addressed. We all know very clearly that diversity, equity, and inclusion are integral components of any company or organization. And we are noticing that in Minneapolis-St. Paul, more companies are looking to be on the inside of this issue rather than the outside looking in. In particular, the wage gap is decreasing, improving on previous years, indicating that the region is moving in the right direction. Other challenges include disrupted supply chains, with one result being inflation that remains a threat on the horizon. The pandemic has also created a debilitating labor shortage that we're all contending with. This is also a reason workforce development is among the region's top priorities. But when we look at the overall picture for greater MSP, what we see is a great deal of optimism. At this time of change, we are now mostly accustomed to living with COVID. It's particularly important to look back and look ahead, leaning on the lessons learned over the past 2 years. At Capital Analytics, like so many other businesses, we saw the pandemic as an opportunity to change things up. Business intelligence now is more important than ever, whether it's in print, digital, or virtual conferences like these. First, we expanded our talented team at Capital Analytics and have entered into 11 new markets in this post-pandemic climate: Minneapolis-St. Paul, Nashville, Pittsburgh, Raleigh-Durham, San Antonio, Dallas-Fort Worth, Jacksonville, Cincinnati, and North and Central Jersey, bringing our economic reporting library to just under 20 metro areas. Next, our Invest Insights video platform has exploded. We brought our network of high-level CEOs in front of the camera to share with our audience views and advice on everything from creativity in light of a pandemic to cryptocurrency and NFTs changing traditional banking norms to the Great Resignation and retaining and attracting talent during these difficult times. We will be filming season 5 in March, and over the past 4 seasons, we found that our partners, like yourselves, want to participate, want a community connection, and want to get the message out on how the world marches on. We expanded that video platform to a podcast so that our readers and viewers can listen to us on the go. So as you can see, the key for us, as with so many of you here today, has been the ability to transform and reinvent. We do have quite a lineup for you today. However, before the discussions begin, I'd like to take a moment and thank today's sponsors: Digi International, ID Insight, Knock Inc., and RSM Minneapolis. Thank you. It is with your support that we can continue to bring high-level speakers and content to the Twin Cities. I would also like to recognize the team who worked tirelessly on this year's report: Juan Clark, Keegan Mccombe, and Josh Andino. Kudos. This is what a wonderful first-year report. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our opening keynote, Commissioner Steve Grove of the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development. Steve, please turn on your video and your audio. And thank you again so much for being here today.
Great, thank you, Abby. Hello, everybody. It's good to see you all. Steve Grove here from the Department of Employment and Economic Development, and really excited for the conversations that we're going to have today about this region, about this state that we all love so much and that we think is really worth promoting. You know, Minnesota is kind of a famously humble state. It's sort of that Scandinavian background. We don't really big ourselves up too much, but we really have no reason to be humble here in our state. And Abby mentioned some of those reasons a moment ago. This is an amazingly diverse, innovative, and dynamic economy that we're really lucky to get to call home. This is the kind of state where entrepreneurs and business leaders have built a really strong legacy that has kind of made Minnesota punch above its weight for decades in the past and for decades to come, we believe. I mean, this is the state that pioneered open heart surgery and supercomputing. We invented hearing aids and the pacemaker. We invented water skiing and the Post-it note. This is an innovative and dynamic state, and it's a hardworking state too. It's a state where people show up to work every day, high labor force participation rates, and we are the #1 state in the nation for business survivability. If you start something here, we're likely to be around in 5 years than any other state in the country. And part of it is that connection and community. You know, having that strong corporate backbone of those Fortune 500s in our metro area in particular, ranking us #1 in the country for that density, just gives us that strength from a business and talent perspective that permeates into so many different industries. And our diverse economy is strong too. We're the 7th most diverse economy of all 384 metropolitan areas in the US. And we've been a top 10 state for business for 12 times in the past few decades. So we're excited about that. And I'll just say on a personal note, you know, I am someone who grew up in Minnesota, but I spent most of my career in California. I built a career out there in technology and got married and had kids. And many of the reasons that I just mentioned, that the strengths of Minnesota's economy that I just mentioned, were reasons that my wife, Mary, and I came back to live here ourselves with our young kids. But not just those statistics around business, of course, or that climate for growth and excitement from a business standpoint, but also because this is a state that has a strong civic fiber. It's a state with a strong sense of community. We are traditionally one of the states that has a higher voter participation in the country, top rates of donations to foundations and to nonprofits. It is a state that gives back and that is connected. And I think that's a message that we really want to make sure people who are considering Minnesota understand about our state. It has a very strong business climate, but also a really strong community as well. Now, you know, our state, like so many, has had a difficult past couple of years, to be clear. And in particular, given the murder of George Floyd right here in our Twin Cities and the aftermath of that and the civil unrest that followed and really the global movement that permeated from here, put a spotlight on Minnesota in ways that we think will help us change the challenges that we do face and address them directly. You'll hear a lot about that today from some of our speakers, but we really think this is an inflection point for our state, a state that has deep income gaps between whites and people of color, to tackle those income gaps and to really lift up efforts across corporate, business, and government communities to make this a moment of racial reckoning and racial change in our state and around the world. And I think that's something that you can see and feel here in the community as groups have come together in these last few years, in particular in Minnesota. Like every state, we lost jobs in the pandemic, but we're roaring back. We had the 9th fastest over-the-year job growth at the end of last year, and some of those disparities that have been longstanding are starting to be chipped away at, which we're excited about. And we also know there are challenges for our economy, like every economy faces, on the workforce front. 205,000 job vacancies in the state, and a lot of effort right now to increase our focus on talent and growing great jobs for the future, which your government is very, very focused on and excited to partner on. So everything's changed over the past few years. We all know that the disruptions of COVID have really accelerated so many trend lines in ways that we believe Minnesota is positioned to take advantage of and to leverage for future growth. We've had a huge uptick in business starts here in Minnesota. Over 40% more businesses were started in the last year in our state than in years before. Every company is reimagining how we work, where we work, what a good job even is. And of course, workers today have unprecedented power in this economy. And that's, we think, ultimately a thing that will lead to better paying jobs, stronger jobs, jobs that value the contributions of workers and that look to the future of where our economy can head. So, you know, this is the kind of state, given our our infrastructure, given our livability, given our community factors, we think is really well positioned to help write the next chapter of the global economy. And I know we'll hear a lot about that today from our panelists, which I'm very excited for. One of the things I wanted to convey just coming from government, I do come from business previously. I was at Google for 12 years before coming into state government. What I want to just share with all of you is that your state government is committed to being a partner in the effort to grow our economy. We are laser focused on how we can meet our mission, which is to empower the growth of the Minnesota economy for everyone. And there's a couple of ways we're doing it that I'll highlight here, just to give you a sense for how state government really works with business in a state like Minnesota to advance key goals that will put us on the cutting edge. First, on the workforce front, we know that every state is facing workforce challenges, but one of Minnesota's differentiators has always been our talent. This is a state that invests in our talent. We're one of the only states in the country that has a workforce development fund putting state dollars into building workforce programs that help provide businesses with the workers that they need. We are undertaking here at Digi a complete reimagination of how we deliver workforce services, transforming our model really to meet the needs of the 21st century job seeker, and investing in the kind of technology and tools we need to do that. We're also focused on helping the pools of labor that are traditionally overlooked by businesses find pathways into great jobs. We've launched an Office of New Americans focused on immigrant refugees. We've greatly expanded our work efforts to help workers with disabilities. And we're looking at ways that we can continue every day to call thousands of Minnesotans across the state and help place them in jobs. You have a very assertive department here in our state government that is really eager to get folks to work and help businesses grow and thrive at this unique time. We also know that the workforce issues require efforts in childcare. They require needs to rebuild communities holistically, and we have a lot of grant dollars and programs going to those ends as well. And then, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Minnesota's innovation ecosystem. And this is something that I think people traditionally look to Silicon Valley or New York or Boston for that kind of startup juice, and Austin increasingly. And I can say, coming from Google and having lived in Silicon Valley for over a decade, Minnesota can play on that same playing field when it comes to startups and innovation. This is a state that has a really strong startup ecosystem. It's integrated really well into the corporate sector here. So there's that kind of synergy of new talent and ideas being backed and mentored by experienced talent. That's a huge advantage in our ecosystem that's, I think, really powerful. And state government's playing a big role here. We've increased technology funding to Minnesota startups by over 50% since Governor Walz came into office. And we've increased the number of innovative businesses that we serve by over 33%. So we are actively pursuing economic development deals and growth opportunities with innovative businesses in our state and in our nation, and it's working. And we've also developed the kind of programs over the past 3 years that we think show state government has skin in the game and wants to make this a state where startups can thrive. We've launched Launch Minnesota, a new program to give innovation grants to very early stage companies. And we fought to bring back the Minnesota Angel Tax Credit, a program that has leveraged about 120 million tax credits to bring almost 500 million more dollars in venture capital to Minnesota startups. So this is a major effort that we're excited about. We think Minnesota startup ecosystem has a rightful place amongst the best in the nation, and your state government is really working to make that even more so. The last thing I'll say is this, I began by talking about how we're a little too humble in Minnesota, and I think that that's true. Nothing wrong with humility as a value. I think that's important, but this is a time when it is competitive out there, and state government, we think, can play a role in really amplifying the great economy that our businesses have built. We have launched a campaign called Build What Matters on the website joinusmn.com. It's kind of our new platform to really provide a front door for businesses, for talent to think about entering Minnesota and considering what the opportunities are here for them, whether those are state government incentives and traditional economic development levers, or whether it's just a clear understanding of what our labor market, our culture, our housing, our infrastructure, and our efforts to fight systemic racism look like in Minnesota. So joinusmn.com is that fresh, brand new site just launched last fall. It gives you a sense for what we're most proud of here in Minnesota, why we want to partner and grow with you. And it's state government's effort to partner with businesses just to elevate the message of Minnesota at this really critical time. And I think that's what this event with Capital Analytics is all about too. So we're honored to be here. I'm grateful to get to kick off what I know will be a great session of conversations today. We have every reason to be proud of this economy, to lift it up, and to welcome more innovators, leaders, businesses, and companies to come here and grow and thrive. And we're thrilled to be able to partner with Capital Analytics to do that in the coming weeks and months. So thanks for having me. Excited for the conversations today. And Abby, I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, it won't be Abby in this case. It's me, Juan. Hi, Commissioner Grove. It's been a little while since I haven't seen you.
Good to
Thank
see
you so
you.
much for being here. And thank you so much for your support and how we partnered, as you mentioned, together to bring more innovation, to bring more talent, and to promote a region that most of the United States, or part of the United States and probably globally, doesn't know how much potential does it have. So thank you, and kudos to you as well, Commissioner Seagrove. Thank you.
Thanks, Juan.
So good morning to everyone. First of all, I want to thank once again officially to Commissioner Grove for being with us live today in this event, and it's an introductory remarks for our first annual Invest Minneapolis-St. Paul 2022 launch conference. As I said before, it's a pleasure to see you again. It's been several months that we've been working on this project. It took a lot of ups and downs, and thank God we were able to bring it to the finish line here at the Twin Cities with one of the strongest reports that we've been able to put together. Also, I would like to acknowledge publicly the outstanding work carried out by DEED and the state of Minnesota in attracting and promoting business to the region with a strong focus in healthcare, technology, and innovation sectors. And that's precisely what this is all about. And that's the discussions that we're going to have today with top-notch speakers and participants. For those who do not know me, my name is Juan Clark. I am Capital Analytics Regional Director, overseeing the company's expansion in the north of the US. Minneapolis-St. Paul is one of our latest markets, as I mentioned before, and it's proved to be a one-of-a-kind place to do business with multiple investment opportunities and untapped potential. Not to mention that Minnesotans have treated us so well that no wonder why the Minnesota Nice comes from. So thank you for giving us the opportunity of coming to your market. And we promise that we're going to bring all the best support, all the best promotion, all the best business intelligence report into this specific market. We have quite a program for you today. Just some quick notes to point out before going into the first panel. All registered attendees are going to receive complimentary access to read our Invest Minneapolis-St. Paul 2022 report digitally. An email will be sent early next week. We're also currently live streaming the event on our YouTube page. It will be live there for anyone that would like to revisit today's recording or wants to share the great discussions in the following panels. In between each panel, we'll be conducting polls to take the temperature of the room on some developments and plans for your companies this year. You're going to see the first one popping up very soon on your screens right now. And the question is, what do you think the Twin Cities' immediate priorities should be? First answer, better public transportation with new and current expansions, improved infrastructure with roads, bridges, and river management. And the third answer will be affordable housing and public safety. So please go ahead and share your thoughts. I believe it's also a great moment while you're participating on the poll to thank all of our event sponsors. Once again, as without them, none of this fantastic event will be possible. And now it's with pleasure that I introduce the first panel, the North Star, Minnesota's Rising Status as a Tech and Innovation Hub. Presenting the panel is Lily Hall, President and CEO of NOC Incorporated. Lily, if you could please turn on your camera, unmute yourself, so you can go ahead and introduce the panel moderator and the panelists.
Good morning and welcome. It's an exciting day here. My name is Lily Hall and I'm the founder and CEO of NOC. NOC is a full experience creative agency headquartered in Minneapolis. It is truly an honor to be here with all of you to listen to the North Star, Minnesota's rising status as tech and innovation hub. We've just heard, we've seen our city go through some very difficult and dark times. But I've also seen how we have all come together to support one another, whether it's big business or small businesses, for-profits and nonprofits. It is this commitment that gives me hope for the future of our city. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the North Star Minnesota's rising status as a tech innovation hub, which will be moderated by Jamie Wool, Office Managing Partner for RSM Minneapolis. Thank you, Jamie.
Great, thanks, Lily. Really appreciate the introduction. And Commissioner Grove, thank you for your comments just a little bit earlier here. As Lily mentioned, I'm Jamie Wool. I'm the Office Managing Partner for RSM, and RSM is the largest accounting and consulting firm that is focused on serving the middle market. So it's my pleasure here to be with all of you today. And also my pleasure to be part of the moderating the group here today, and three very esteemed people that will be joining me. Adam Elliott. Adam is the founder and president of ID Insight. Ron Konechny is the president and CEO of Digi International. And Joyce Esther, president of Normandale Community College. And as we have limited time this morning, rather than ask each of the participants to introduce themselves a little bit more, I thought I would just dive into a couple questions, and maybe just through that, you'll get a little bit more insights as to their backgrounds and point of view on things. So Adam and Ron, I'm going to start out with a question to you, a little bit more what I'd say maybe business oriented. And then Joyce, I'm going to follow up with you a little bit more with the focus on higher education, and certainly the area that you come from. So Adam, I'll start with you. We've all seen how the changed landscape has brought Minnesota's technology and innovation sectors to the forefront. Talk a little bit about how your organization leverages this shift to encourage further growth and innovation.
Yeah, great question. In terms of what we do, just a little background, what we do every day is provide fraud solutions for the financial and services industry. So banks, credit unions across the country. And really when we show up for work every day, our job is to stop the bad guy, right? From people defrauding the financial system. So it's an easy mission statement. And so from a technology standpoint, we do kind of need the best and the brightest in terms of data sciences and analytics. And so we are a tech company through and through data science and analytics. So that's a critical aspect for us. It's just the talent levels that we need to stay one step ahead of the fraud, if you will.
Great. Ron, how would you answer the same question?
We're just similar to Adam. We're give a little background on Digi. We're probably the state's, if not one of the country's leading industrial Internet of Things providers. So we focus on helping connect machines to the internet. We're all horribly connected to the internet, I'm sure at times, through phones and computers, and machines are laggards. And so having the understanding of wireless technology, the understanding of to connect and speak machine languages, and then have that information be funneled up into a cloud and a mobile app. And similar to Adam, we also have a lot of data science needs, because a lot of this data comes in and it's impossible for a human to analyze it. And so that vast trove of data needs to be distilled into really information and ultimately insights for you to make better decisions. And so we, like Adam, are a tech company, although we are supported by a tremendous number of functions. We're a publicly held company, so we've got a really strong finance and planning and investor relations group as well. But talent right now is the number one objective, both keeping your talent engaged and valued, but also then attracting new talent to the team.
Yeah, Ron, you summed it up well, especially with the talent, retention and attraction. For anybody that's been associated with people in the schools, anywhere from kindergarten through upper education, certainly the last 2 years have shifted that whole group in a way that's never happened before. And so, Joyce, can you talk a little bit about what you see as a long-term shift or change in operations and strategy that will remain once COVID is no longer such a priority as it is today?
Well, thanks, Jamie. I think that as we all keep talking about, we have learned new ways to do things, particularly in higher education. There were times where there were certain courses or certain programs where we never thought that we would ever teach them in a virtual environment. We had students, I know for me, I was one of those kind of people, if anyone ever said to me, you had to do all your classes online, I would be like, no, that would never happen. And now we were forced to do it. And so it's requiring us in the higher education sector to really look at making sure that not only are we providing opportunities from a technological standpoint for our students, but quality opportunities for our students so that they can engage in the academic work. One of the things I think that we've opened it up, that we have made higher education a lot more accessible for our non-traditional students, right? For that working adult who really only has free time at 9 o'clock at night, when typically in higher education, we don't have a class at 9 o'clock at night when we were doing the straight brick and mortar type program. So I think it also opens up higher education to broader groups of people who then will want to either enter into the workforce or advance themselves into the workforce. So I do think that being able to do a lot of this asynchronous learning and education is something that's going to stay with us, I believe, for in perpetuity.
Right, right. Would you say what we've experienced the last 2 years has accelerated what was going to occur, or do you think we're going down a different path that we maybe never would have?
I personally think it has accelerated. I think that there are some of our institutions, not only in this region, but across the country, that already saw an increase in online education, particularly for folks who live in rural parts of their state or this state where maybe sometimes it's difficult to get certain courses or get certain programs. So I actually do think that it has elevated or accelerated rather that work that we were supposed to be doing in the first place.
Great, great. So really an opportunity for those involved in upper education. Adam, coming back to you, technology has certainly become center stage. You alluded to it. The need for cybersecurity has become paramount. With a variety of organizations, big and small, now doing business in the virtual space, what are the key concerns you have regarding their security, and how will cybersecurity be a key component of any business strategy?
Yeah, and just kind of as a backdrop, I mentioned the banking kind of focus and just to give you, and this is true, and I'm sure everybody on the panel's world, but I remember I'm aging myself, but I remember the .com era, right, when the first internet bank showed up. I think it was X.com, which became PayPal. So at the time, there were 0% of accounts being opened up online. And as recently as about 4 or 5 years ago, it was at 20%. Now it's over 50. And I think, everybody kind of follows the same train, but before, fraud would keep the systems from getting there, and now banks, they have to be competitive. It's just where we're going. So when you think of as we think of cybersecurity, of which we're a part of, when we think of that, we think of it as suddenly, everything used to be face to face, and now everything's moving digital, and it's critical and paramount that who's at the other end of that transaction is the way we think of it. Whether it's a bad guy just trying to, do malicious behavior, or it's somebody applying for an account in somebody else's name. But you really need to establish that trust. And in the new world order, in the old world, you'd present your name, social, date of birth, and that's who you were. In the new world order, we're moved down almost into a zero trust environment, where it's like, I have to assume that it's the bad guy sitting in front of me. So that whole identity thing, and we saw with identity fraud where we get focused a lot, is really being critical, and it can impact, and it does impact everybody's business. You've heard of the emails that say, you get an email from the CEO saying, hey, I just did this, so please wire $40,000 over here, right? And it's not really the CEO, it's somebody spoofing the CEO. And also we get involved a little bit, but every business can be impacted like by account takeover, where in fact, there was a story a couple of years ago where, I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago, a UPS employee actually went to the post office and changed the corporate address for UPS to an address that he had access to. And within days, he had hundreds of credit cards and checks being delivered to him before they caught him, of course. But the point is, anybody can be impacted. They are being impacted. So, we need to have the defenses, whether it's identity or like, what Ron focuses on as well, to be able to basically, be able to protect both the front door and the back door.
Yeah, with what you do in your business, how do you stay in front of this? Because it's that the change is only accelerating, not static by any means.
Yep. One thing kind of interesting, having watched this emerge for so long, is I mentioned your identity used to be your name, social, date of birth. Now think of it as every transaction you perform. And what's happening behind the scenes is there's networks. So like if you go to OpenTable or to Expedia, that data is being collected in a good way, right? Because now these networks are able to say, I know Adam, there's his name, social, that's easy. But I know what his IP address is at home and at work. I know what his email is, if I can establish that network. And so that's one way, that's really what's going on right now, is the creation of these, the data networks that are going out there are massive, right? I think I heard a stat last year that said there'll be more data collected this year than all time since the beginning of, man. And it's true. And so that's how we're able to do that. We see fraud rings every day. We'll see them hit bank A, B, C, D, E, and they're just rifling through it. And so the establishment of these large networks and then connecting them to really come back to, this seems very, very fraudish, or it's a good transaction. So and we have to. So when we get the banks to report to us what's fraud, we see new fraud trends emerge every day. And it's, you put your finger in the dike and you stop that one and they just move to the next system, right? Because they're just always testing and they're talking. And so you got to keep on top of all of that and always pursue, whatever the next thing is going to be, because it will be something.
Right. I liked your comment that there's more data generated and collected this year than, collectively through time. And you might be able to make the same statement a year from now and the year after that. So it's just continuing to accelerate. So, but Ron, pivot to you here a little bit. And, certainly 2 years ago, some people thought of technology, that was Zoom, as we pivoted to a virtual environment. So, when they think about tech in the workplace, how will the continued propagation of the Internet of Things, further drive efficiency, just not in the office, but across industries and how companies work with each other? And think about the supply chain. We certainly have been hearing a lot about that, and things that are adjacent to it too.
Yeah, Jamie, I don't know if you recall when this pandemic started, which seems like forever ago, but we basically shut down the country except for essential services. Remember that term, essential services? And I think some of us kind of viewed, well, what's essential? Food, water. Well, it turns out essential services is quite a long list, and it's almost the entire industrial economy. And so we didn't really get fully aware of how essential Digi was. And a lot of our customers who had made investments were able to leverage their investments and keep their people safe and not congregating or not out in the open. People that didn't make investments really accelerated. So even our video call here, if you didn't have video-based messaging, you probably got Zoom or another technology like it pretty quickly. Same thing happened in the industrial world, where that really accelerated their pace. And that pace of change went throughout the supply chain, in trailers, in warehouses, and trucks, and in stores. Grocery stores became essential services. And these grocery store workers were under tremendous pressure to keep themselves safe, keep their customers safe, keep those stores stocked. And technology for our grocery companies, for example, was able to take away tasks that were really repetitive, things a computer could do really well, like checking temperatures. Right now, grocery stores, to make sure that their customers are getting safe food or medicine, are checking temperatures every so often. That's not a job I'd want to do. And if I did it for a while, I'd probably write down the same temperature because it doesn't change a lot, right? That is a perfect example of automating that so your team members can focus on higher value things. So that acceleration and the success that companies have had of getting higher job satisfaction, protecting their people, that's really staying with them. And we're seeing great demand and interest in going further on those digital transformation initiatives, taking work that's done manually and transforming it digitally. And we think that's a trend that is going to accelerate.
Yeah, I would think, we're talking about the challenge on talent and attracting and retaining, and then of course the increased cost of talent too, which I would imagine ties in very nicely with some of the advances that you just talked about.
Yeah, even some ways they manage their equipment. One of our largest customers is a large retail pharmacy chain, and we monitor all of their refrigeration equipment to make sure that their food and medicine, which, with the vaccine, really important medicine, right? Be ashamed to have that critical medicine go to waste if it wasn't properly handled. And a side benefit has been this customer coming to us and saying, what refrigerator should we buy? You think about the typical procurement process. You ask the refrigerator vendor, hey, tell me how your stuff works and how much energy does it use? How often does it break? Well, now we have all this data to actually see how it does perform versus how somebody is telling how they think it will perform.
Yeah, and I would imagine along those lines, you can sense when there's an issue before it becomes an issue.
That's right. That's right. We call them refrigeration whisperers.
All right. I love it. Joyce, I wanted to pivot to you here. While technology becomes increasingly common and disruptive to industries, how will the narrative around certifications, associates, the 4-year degree, what constitutes a qualified or skilled worker begin to shift? And what role will higher education play in that conversation?
Well, Obviously, higher education has a big role to play, but I also think it's conversations like this where we're partnering with business and industry and government, and we're really getting a clear understanding of what the needs are. As Ron, you were just talking about, what you're saying, like maybe there's an opportunity for us in higher education to create a degree or a certificate in refrigeration whisperer, right? For us to understand, because you all are there on the front lines and you see what's coming down the pike. And so how do you work with us to say, here's some skills that we need our workers to have, not only now, but in the future. I recently heard a presentation by a woman coming out of Microsoft and was really talking about how this whole digital age has really helped us be more effective in hiring folks with disabilities, right? And so how do we make sure, because we have technology. So companies maybe in the past might have talked about, well, it's too expensive to hire someone with a disability, which is somewhat illegal, but here's an opportunity, like you now have this technology here. Use the technology to get different people into the workforce. And so for higher education, we have the opportunity not only to train teachers and educators in working with diverse learners, but also working with industry to make sure that we are providing the credentials and we are providing what's needed. I also think that it is our opportunity to say, I had a conversation several years ago with a particular industry because they were saying that they needed workers in this particular field. They need them. And then we started to talk about, well, what are you paying them? What is it that they're going to be asked to do? What's the schedule? And to be really fair, how unfair is that for an industry to say, I need someone with a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and I'm only going to be paying them $30,000, $40,000 a year, right? Well, I think we also need to be honest about the conversation about what's required. What can happen? I know for students coming out of our community college, they have been trained, they have really wonderful education, they have great information, and why can't they be doing certain skills and certain things that are asked for just because someone says that you want to have, a bachelor's degree or a master's degree? I'm not, against that because I have several degrees and I think getting degrees are important, but I think we need to have a conversation, an honest conversation about what is it that's required? Because let's be honest, just like our students are savvy with us, they are also savvy employees. They know their worth, right? And so we also, and maybe because we've also told them as educators that we have trained you, we have educated you, we have given you the knowledge and the skills. So we can't have you now going off into the industry and being taken advantage of.
Yeah, Joyce, this maybe ties in with my follow-up on that is, a lot of times people think four-year education is what's so necessary coming out of high school. And I think most people would say, no, that isn't necessarily the case. And not everybody should aspire towards a four-year education. So how do, community colleges fit into that niche? And what do you see the opportunity to?
Well, first of all, I always say to folks that community college is still college, right? Oftentimes I'll hear people say things like, well, college isn't for everyone. You could go to community college or you should go to a technical school. That's college, right? And so we need to make sure that we understand how we are talking about our industry, first of all, in higher education. And so is it important for everyone to get a baccalaureate degree, a master's degree, a doctorate? No. But on the same token, I think we need to provide an infrastructure so that people have the opportunity, if they have a high school diploma, but we've provided them with what we like to call stackable credentials so that later they can enter in at different parts of their career. I think the community colleges is much more accessible for so many individuals. One, because community colleges tend to be in the areas, particularly in greater Minnesota. We have community colleges closer to where people are. And so the opportunity for people to get their degrees and credentials close to home, because maybe they can't leave or don't want to leave the community that they live in. And so that's where I think community colleges have a really important role to play in making sure that the folks in their community have the educational opportunities that are going to allow them to get into the workforce or to move up in the workforce. What I don't want to have happen is that people see community colleges or community and technical colleges as a place where we're just trying to train someone for that one specific little job, because then we're going to pigeonhole folks and then they may not have the skills necessary to move up and ladder up in an industry or move off to another industry. But community colleges, I think, particularly now, in this environment where people are coming at different stages of their career back to higher education, we have a really important role to play. Again, not that our colleagues at the universities don't, but I think, again, because of proximity, that makes our role a little bit more important for some folks.
Great. Thank you for your comments on that. Adam, let me go back to you now, and I'm going to ask the same question for all three of you, but I think you're going to approach it from a different angle. And I think through the lens of, is it capital, is it people, whatever. But what do you consider the key needs for Minnesota's tech and innovation sector to continue to grow moving forward?
And Commissioner Grove talked about it a little bit, but I really do think investment. You know, as we know, we've got a very vibrant tech culture that's emerged. In my world, you know, we're known for med tech and, you know, the Medtronics and the Mayo Clinics and attracting a lot of investment there. But when you come into the other sides of tech with, you know, Ron and you know, our company, it's like, you know, historically Minneapolis was kind of looked at a little bit as flyover country in terms of Silicon Valley and Boston. And clearly that's beginning to change. And I think this is all kind of coalescing. So I really do think it's investment. You know, we talk about the Fortune 500s, but the question then becomes, what is the next one and the next one that can come out of Minneapolis, right? And sometimes you need, you know, some pretty deep investment beyond just, you know, medical and that side of tech, but in the world of data sciences and computing and all the other pieces of tech. So when I look at, you know, what we already have is a great thing, but if we can spawn those workers that there are today to go start the next thing and the next thing, that's critical in terms of our not just continued growth, but accelerated growth.
Medical device here in Minnesota would be a great example of that, right?
Yeah. And so getting beyond that is kind of what I was alluding to, is we've got a lot of technology folks that can go beyond, you know, what we've seen on the medical side. Yeah.
Good. Ron, how would you answer the same question?
Yeah, Jamie, I as a quick background, I had the great pleasure of starting a company. I was 26 years old, so I was smart enough not to fall into obvious fires, but I was stupid enough to think I could actually do it. And it was a great point for me in time because I was single, and so I was able to really throw myself into this startup. And I remember starting that company and raising money, and boy, was it difficult. Minnesota, Commissioner Grove hit on this. Minnesota is a wonderful place. It is a bit risk averse. Whether it's taking a chance on Joyce's students or taking a chance on a young entrepreneur, I'd like to see this company be willing to take chances. We're going to have some failures, but the successes are going to far outweigh the failures. So I'd like to see Minnesota increase its risk appetite on more diverse workforce, on entrepreneurs that are putting themselves on the line. And I think it starts with people like us that have had the experience, and I've had a chance to invest now in some younger companies. And I'd like to see more of that. If you look at other areas of the world, look at Silicon Valley, look at how Silicon Slopes in Salt Lake City, some other areas, you see a lot of people that have had success giving back. And we've got to do more of that. We got to take on some more risk here in Minnesota.
Well put. So, Joyce, I'm assuming you'll probably have a little bit different take on that, but what do you see as Minnesota's most critical needs?
First of all, the basic needs of making sure that folks have the technology, access to the technology to even learn it and to be able to use it, right? And we know that that's very different depending on where you live. I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, we would hear stories of students who would, go ride the light rail so that they would have access to Wi-Fi, or, sit outside a Starbucks, or, I heard one story of a student who kind of, there was a hotspot or whatever that thing is called in his neighborhood, but literally he had to go sit by the corner because it didn't make it all the way down to his home, right? And so that's the first thing. I think we need to make sure that we have the infrastructure throughout the Minnesota, because people can't use and access technology if they don't even know how, if they don't even have it. So I think that would be first and foremost. And again, I love, Ron, what you said. We do have to take a chance on folks. I think we have to, disrupt a little bit this idea about what it means for people to be successful. I think one of the other things that we've all talked about is even that telework environment, right? That I remember, I always say that I was one of those kind of folks that, community colleges in general, we are in the people business. There's no way we're teleworking, but we also understand that we're competing against industry and places where people are allowed to telework at some point. And so we have to have those kind of conversations. But what does that mean? Because actually, even if we say, yes, we provide telework, there are people, if I am a single parent with 3 children at home, right, whether I'm going to school or working from home, that's still a difficult proposition for me to have. And so I just think that we need to make sure that while we're thinking about these things as far as, telework or technology, excuse me, there's a lot of tails that come with it as well, right? There's a lot of tails that we also need to deal with. And one of the things that I'm always talking about with regard to technology is the mental health issues that are coming as a function of it. I think that there's a lot of things that are happening. And I think that while we're doing some of these things as a state, we need to be able to provide folks, because people are losing this connection with each other. They're losing connection with their communities in some ways when we're doing a lot of technology. So I think that that's some of the stuff that I would like to see happen, is to make sure, one, that we have the infrastructure to be able to do it, but we also, to Ron's point, giving people a shot and a chance. I think technology is allowing folks to do it. So, yeah.
Yeah. I want to probe a little bit more on, Ron, the comment you made about the willingness to take risks. We talked a little bit earlier about some of the programs Minnesota has in place with the angel investors credit. But what do you see as some of the other things that might be unique about Minnesota that we need to push on a little bit in regards to being willing to take the risks to move forward in regards to technology and in ways that we maybe aren't even thinking about right now?
Yeah, I really like what Joyce was saying, and we're challenging ourselves here. We haven't pushed ourselves hard enough to look in areas where we don't traditionally look for talent. And, a lot of times in business, it's like you're trying to solve a problem. So you look to hire somebody that's like, and Joyce has made this point, they're perfect. They've done this before, they've had success, and maybe you have to pay them a little more because they've had that experience base. We've got to push ourselves to get a new generation of workers in here and be willing to help them succeed. And that's gonna pay dividends for generations behind us. But it starts with us right now. We got to make these decisions and efforts right now to be more inclusive. We're all, Adam mentioned it, we're all dying for talent, and the talent's there. We got to connect these dots. And sometimes when we're in different social cones, it's harder for us to connect because we don't intersect enough. And now it's even worse because a lot of us are on Zoom meetings, and so we're not getting a chance to bump into each other. I think live events would help, and hopefully, knock on wood, we continue our trend here and there's more outreach, because I think there's connections made in person that are even more valuable than connections are made on calls like these today.
Well put. Adam, your reaction.
Yeah, I think that's in kind of dovetails into some of the pandemic things, but it's almost like I use the analogy of like smoking back in the day was like a good thing till we found out what it really was. I think the same thing, bad analogy maybe for the pandemic, but I think there's this undercurrent of the social need that we have, and it's just going to be time, right? We could all talk about like, hey, we did just fine, we became efficient, we did all these great things. I think that's all true, but when I think about some of the things we've done, to Ron's point, the one that's really been hard for us is to continue to find ways to celebrate. We're all from home, right? And you can kind of concoct it, but that social aspect I think is so critical. And we're all kind of groveling to get that back into our lives as soon as we can. And I think as time goes by, we hear some of the things already, but yeah, that face-to-face and that social interaction is critical. And we're groveling. We're finally going back to the office 2 days next week. But I think along the same lines as, whether it's downtown, where we're located, but people need that. Even I don't think it'll ever be 5 days again, but certainly, even 2 days would be like, nirvana for people.
Yeah. Jay, I don't know if you agree, Adam and Joyce as well. I think we've got to embrace hybrid work. We've got to embrace more flexible work that accommodates people's personal objectives and responsibilities with their professional ones. I call it, excuse the term, microdosing. You may need to microdose some vacation, next to work and vice versa. I do believe in the power of an office and having in-person meetings, especially for people that are newer to the workforce or newer to a responsibility or a job. That's an incredibly important mentoring. I think you'll find academic studies, and Joyce would check me on this, years from now, that look at teammates that worked remotely and those that had at least some of their time in the office. And I bet you those people that are in the office got paid more, got promoted more, advanced more than their peers, because it's that valuable.
Yeah, Ron, I agree with your comments there. And two things I would say is we all know that diverse communities and workplaces are higher performing. And secondly, culture is such a key component of how companies advance and attract and retain people. And all three of you touched upon it today. So our time here is up, which went very quickly, but and that's only because of just the great comments, insights that all three of you had. So I want to thank all of you for being part of this, and I'll give it back.
And if everyone could just hold for 1 second, we're taking a quick picture. Smile. Perfect.
Right. Well, thank you very much to all the panelists today. It was a fantastic conversation. We learned a few things. I wish that we could have stayed a little bit more on this panel about diversity, obviously, equity, inclusion, justice, going back to the office in Minnesota, and even a few new terms that were new, at least new to many of us, risk averse, microdosing, and a few couple more things. So anyways, I want to thank once again to everyone. I appreciate Lily, Jamie, Adam, Ron, and Joyce for being with us today. And for such an insightful panel of the potential of Minnesota becoming the next valley for technology and innovation. Now, we're conducting 3 polls today, during today's event to get your thoughts on current things happening in Minnesota and in the world of business overall. The second one should be coming up on your screen shortly. Please go ahead and share your valuable thoughts on the following question. Aside from increasing revenues and profits, which of the following is the top priority for your organization during 2022? So go ahead, share your answers. And by the end of the program, we're going to see what the temperature is in the room. While you're answering, if you're enjoying today's program, be sure to check out our Leadership Summit happening March 2nd with Invest San Antonio 2022, Jacksonville, Greater Fort Lauderdale, Greater Orlando, North and Central Jersey also coming up in the next few months. And if you know anyone in these cities who would like to participate in such reports, please reach out to me, jclark@capitalaa.com. In addition, stay in touch by signing up to any of our market newsletters or receive a copy of our reports by emailing contact@capitalalaa.com or visiting our website, capitalanalyticsassociates.com. As our poll is ending, I would like to introduce our second panel called Health is Wealth. A beautiful rhyme there, created by Josh Andino. Healthcare's critical role in creating economic growth and equity. Moderating the panel is Kim Norton, Mayor of the City of Rochester. Kim, please turn on your audio and camera. It is nice to see you after a little while. And I'll hand it to you so you can introduce the panelists.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I do want to say this should be a really exciting panel. It is really exciting as the mayor of the 3rd largest city in the state of Minnesota to be able to interview these wonderful panelists. So I'm going to just introduce them. We have so many questions that I'm going to introduce them now, and then we'll go right to the questions so you have a chance to hear from this great panel. So again, we have 4 panelists. Patrick Sieb is the Executive Director of the Destination Medical Center. He's just waving there. Thank you, Patrick. Peter Frosch, who's the President and CEO of Greater MSP. He's down in the bottom right on my screen. Angelia Melander, who is President of Century College. And last but not least is Melissa Knoll, who is the Director of Corporate Development for Mayo Clinic, which, as I mentioned, we're the 3rd largest city. We also have the largest employer in the state of Minnesota, and that is Mayo Clinic. So very happy to have this wonderful panel. And we're going to jump right into questions. And if they have a little bit to share about their particular institution, they can weave that into their comments. But we really want to get to the questions. So let's start with something that I think everybody has already alluded to, which is this once-in-a-lifetime event we've been through, the pandemic. Could you share for us, and let's start with Melissa on this one, and all of you are going to answer it. How did the pandemic highlight the critical importance of healthcare and those related industries such as med and biotech, those sectors? How did it affect the economic engines, the importance of economic engines and the life-saving occupations? So both, because we're talking today about healthcare. So Melissa, you can unmute.
Sure thing. Thank you for having me today and for letting me take the first crack. I'd say collaboration was a huge portion of the pandemic and how we got through some of those initial hurdles at the beginning. And I thought it was really inspiring to see how some typical competitors were linking arms to drive results and achieve some pretty impressive progress in a short amount of time. I think it also highlighted the importance of legislation and regulations and how bringing changes there had a massive impact to healthcare. And we're hoping that we get to hang on to some of those, the benefits of those. It also demonstrated in real time how technology can benefit patients in a way that we hadn't seen before. So I think right now we're setting the stage, kind of laying the infrastructure of healthcare for the next few decades via the changes that took place during the pandemic. So we're definitely hoping to continue advancing along those lines in the realms of artificial intelligence and machine learning, as well as in medtech and biotech.
Thank you. Angelia, do you want to take a crack at this?
Sure. Good morning, afternoon. President of Century College. We are the largest comprehensive community college, which means liberal arts and sciences, as well as career and technical programs. We're the second largest in Minnesota behind Normandale, my colleague who was on the panel before me. The pandemic exacerbated many things that related to education and the access to education, in particular in healthcare. We found ourselves in March trying to pivot to an environment for our career and technical programs, particularly our health sciences programs, that are difficult to deliver online, and where students needed to be in those face-to-face settings. As far as healthcare, we found ourselves having difficulty giving clinical setting experiential learning for our students because our healthcare system was overcome with the reality of the pandemic, which is totally understandable. Century's approach in all of the Men's State colleges and universities was to stay open during the pandemic. We did not close. We pivoted all of our classes as required within the two-week period that we had to do so. But we kept, when we returned after the mandatory stay at home, we brought our healthcare students and all our face-to-face learners back in our space with tremendous uncertainty and limited or not enough PPE. So we were able to graduate the same number of healthcare students who stayed with us in all healthcare fields. And we work with our providers to get as much of the clinical experience we could get and simulated the rest. So it was a massive pivot, but it was a needed pivot. And we still met our obligations of educating our workforce in partnership with business and industry.
Thank you for sharing that. I think many of us have wondered how training was going to continue to provide the workforce we know that we need during a pandemic. And so it's great to hear how you were successful in that. Patrick C., Destination Medical Center, do you want to?
Sure. Thank you. And I think that's a great question. And first of all, I just want to thank Capital Analytics and all of the speakers before us and the panel that I'm joining, and Mayor, your leadership in moderating this panel and your leadership in Rochester. I would say that one of the things that I think is most telling coming out of the panic or living through the pandemic is, one, the importance of infrastructure, the importance of when you think about how quickly vaccines were created in response to COVID-19. We understand actually the groundwork for that had been laid for 10 or 12 or 15 years before that. And having the critical infrastructure in science and technology that allows for being nimble and responsive is extraordinarily important. But this crisis, it may be a pandemic, maybe a once in a lifetime, and let's hope it is, but it's not going to be the only crisis that we face in communities. And I think that's the other lesson that has come out of this, is how nimble and how responsive and how are our systems in place in order to respond to a crisis, which oftentimes by definition is something we've never experienced before. So how nimble are our government systems, our interaction between public and private sector, our interaction between various industries within private sector to demonstrate and be responsive. And I think those are some of the things that in many ways, I think we're going to be able to judge out that we as a community here in Rochester, that perhaps Minnesota, that we actually did quite well. Living through it, maybe it doesn't quite feel that way, but looking back, we may find that we actually did quite well in terms of our responsiveness. And those are all tools that we're going to need to build on for the next crisis that will inevitably come our way. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but.
Thank you for that. I don't think we're ready to think about that quite yet. But Peter, maybe you can answer this question too and talk from the greater MSP viewpoint about those related industries like med tech and biotech. Maybe you could touch on that for us.
Absolutely. The pandemic experience introduced some new language to us very quickly, like essential worker. And I think in retrospect, we also saw essential sectors. And med tech and biotech, I think, clearly have proven to fall into those categories. We were fortunate in the Minneapolis-St. Paul region and in the state of Minnesota to have such a deep presence of the med tech industry, because we saw demand in that industry expand, not only stabilize, but expand throughout the course of the pandemic. And we've seen really significant growth, 2021 and into 22 around R&D and headquarters and advanced manufacturing related to this sector. And the value of that for our economy was that we've seen the Minneapolis-St. Paul region not dip as low as many of our peers in terms of unemployment during 2020 and 21. It stabilized the economy. And so, that has given us a strong base from which to continue our growth. And we're continuing to work every day to invest in that sector.
I appreciate that. And something many of you have touched on, I want to get to with this next question, which is, I heard the word collaboration, and I heard it here and I heard it before. And so how is the current landscape increased collaboration within the healthcare ecosystem and those related industries? And how has the collaboration been a benefit to the overall community? Melissa, do you want to start?
Absolutely. As we discussed before, I think collaboration is so critical, and there are a few different coalitions that took a leading stance, such as the COVID-19 Healthcare Coalition, which Dr. Hlamka from Mayo Clinic was a big part of to drive results. I think there were some really interesting new models in healthcare that cropped up that directly rely on that collaboration, such as what we call advanced care at home at Mayo Clinic. And this is a structure where we offer inpatient level care to patients in their homes. So we're seeing this blurring of lines between sectors. Is that technology? Is that healthcare? Is it both? And the awesome thing is that patients are benefiting from it. So we're seeing better outcomes, better patient satisfaction, as well as some really cool opportunities for our providers. So we're definitely hoping to see more collaboration and more innovation that comes from it.
Wonderful. And Julia?
I want to share my punch on that a little bit later, if I can, but I will say this. Collaboration is key in everything we do, because what we believe is that intellectual capital is shared across sectors. We can all help each other in the space. Partnership for us is key in communicating our challenges as well as our opportunities. And we wouldn't know the stresses of others if we didn't communicate the stresses of ourselves. And so I think that in any collaborative space, that conversation has to happen. We did not necessarily come up with any new, innovative techniques. We were trying to get through what we were faced with and having the necessary conversations to get through it. And we prevailed. And our resiliency was applauded and untapped in the talent that we came together to make this work in the same space. We were all in it, but in it at different levels of difficulty to get out of it or get through it. So, but I will talk a little bit more later about the partnership and collaboration question, because we really do have to partner together and get out of that silo type mentality and not realizing others are in the space with you.
Thank you for that. And I would say before Peter speaks, or Patrick, I guess we can start with you there since I saw you on mute. We'll give Peter one more moment. Both Mayo Clinic and Destination Medical Center are Rochester related. And I know as the mayor of a community struggling through the pandemic that they were wonderful partners and collaborators for us. In fact, as Patrick answers, his whole entity really is all about partnership and collaboration. And maybe you can just talk about that a little bit.
Well, I think, again, a crisis like this reminds us how important the collaboration muscle is. When things are going well and there is no obvious force kind of fighting against you or against the work you're doing, it's easy to get in a compartment or channelize your work. And I was leaning on Angelina's reference to resilience. I think that is what makes for a resilient society and a resilient community. And building that collaboration muscle, again, which came out of the pandemic. I mean, in Rochester, we stood up as an immediate response, a network of all of the economic and community development organizations to meet weekly to figure out what are the tools we each have that are different than the tools somebody else has that we can put on the table that we can use to collectively solve the crisis of the day or the issue of the day. And I think that what we have found is we don't want to let go of that tool, that methodology, that approach, because it served us so well and it will continue to serve us well.
So very true. Peter, you want to give a shot on this one?
Maybe final thought. I mean, even coming into the pandemic, there was a shift in the language and the thinking around not just thinking about the provision of healthcare, but thinking about wellness. And so, I think if anything, that has accelerated throughout the course of the pandemic. And it can't be just thinking about the patient and thinking about what happens in a healthcare setting. If we pull back societally and say, collaboration is the only way to achieve wellness. And so if you're in the housing space, if you're working on creating employment opportunities, and thinking about prevention and nutrition, and then care and connectedness. I mean, this all surrounds the healthcare system, and we don't want to burden the healthcare system any more than it needs to. And so let's support people in our communities with full lives and with the things that they need to be successful, and then we can be maybe accelerate that shift into the wellness mindset.
And if I could just add, Mayor, because the pandemic was a global phenomena, it meant that everybody was facing the issue at the same time and trying to solve through it at the same time. And, unlike a flood in the Red River in Fargo, where you say, oh, that's their thing, let's wish them well, or a tornado in Oklahoma or mudslide in India, this was something that all of us across the country, across the world were trying to navigate through. And I think it led to, again, this sort of set of this international conversation around how do we solve this together and what are we learning along the way and how do we behave differently.
I'd also add that Minnesota is such a great place for that collaboration, given that we have the students, the research, the healthcare settings, the industry. So I think the potential is right for us to make a lot of progress right here.
I absolutely agree. And I think for the city, we saw partnerships that had not been there before suddenly materialize. And I do think, to the comments some of you have made, those are, and need to continue into the future to solve problems. And so I think it has helped us. And I really appreciate the different ways you've all pointed that out. So I'm going to drill down with a question for each of you that's just specific to you. And I'm going to start with Mr. Seed. While people may not immediately associate healthcare with tourism, how does having a strong healthcare presence in an area help to draw both visitors and new residents to a city and generate ancillary benefits across the wider community? And what do those ancillary benefits look like in a tangible way?
Sure. Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, one doesn't necessarily think of medical care as a tourist engine. But here in Rochester, more than 3 million people a year come to Rochester quite often for services at Mayo Clinic or related business, because they're coming here for the best healthcare that can be provided in the country and perhaps in the world. That said, but it really represents even a bigger opportunity. As we think about Rochester as America's city for health, we think of being able to lean into that brand of Med City, which is we're known as locally and sort of organically, but really think about how does, if we want to position our city as a place that if you're in the wearable technology business, or in the healthy food business, or in the prosthetics business, or in the mobility device business, that you want to be located in Rochester. You want to have your business, you want to have a flag or a headquarters in Rochester because you want to be associated with this brand of America's City for Health. And I think that's the opportunity that we have in our community and coming out of the pandemic where, as I've been told that in past pandemics, the attention to health and public health continues with us long after perhaps the virus has been tamped down. People are thinking about health in a very different way. Maybe you want to live closer to a place that you can get the best healthcare in the world. So why not choose Rochester when you can live anywhere and work anywhere? Why not choose Rochester? So those are some ways that we think about the opportunities coming out of this work.
Thank you. I think sometimes people don't like to think of medical tourism, but in fact, that is what our community has. And so we can talk a little bit more about healthcare here with Peter Frosch, if you'll take this question. Well, with healthcare and related bio and med tech sectors expected to continue to grow nationally and across the Twin Cities, how have the region's strength in these industries prepared it for future growth? And how will that help to provide both new opportunities and address longstanding economic disparities?
So I think in the first part of that question, something that MSP in Minnesota have that's really unique is a density of companies and assets. So maybe if we just start with the med tech sector, which is an industry that was invented in this place. You have global leaders like Medtronic, you have fast growing companies that are spinning out of those companies. You have startups, you also have capital, you have the advertising, you have the legal. And when we've worked with Medical Alley, which is a great partner in this space, we found that the value of that ecosystem is that if you've got a device in this market, you get to market 6 months faster than any place in the country. And that 6 months is worth millions of dollars in different costs. And it's probably the difference between your company making it or not, or that product making it to market or not, because it's so expensive to do that. And so that ecosystem creates value and creates competitive advantage. In addition to medtech, you think about the hospital systems. We've talked about Mayo, which is obviously appropriated as the best hospital system in the country and the world. And then we also have a very high performing network of nonprofit-based health providers in the state and in the Minneapolis-St. region, which are very coordinated and connected to that ecosystem. Then you have the insurers, Blue Cross Blue Shield and Medica, United Health Group, Fortune 100 company, which has this trove of data out of which new companies and innovations are coming. So that's a lot of assets in one place. And it's at the intersection of all those things where new domains, new companies, new technologies are being developed. So I think that's the answer to, how do the existing strengths position us to see and capture those opportunities. Regarding addressing longstanding economic disparities, we have to have economic opportunity to address disparities. So, if that is going to be a fountain of economic opportunity, then we have to, with equal focus and attention, be doing new things and with better results to work with communities that have not had access to that opportunity and be really aggressive about creating those pathways and start earlier, starting with awareness, of students and families early on, investing in networks to get people connected in addition to the skill building.
Thank you for that. And I think this next question, Ms. Millender will certainly have some interest, I think, in following up on what you said as well. The question we have targeted for her is, despite the best efforts of higher education, the labor shortage remains a key issue facing healthcare organizations in all its forms. From your own conversations with students or your colleagues in higher education and the healthcare sectors, what needs to change for the supply to be able to match the demand for healthcare workers? And if you could maybe hit on that economic disparities question as well, would be great.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Mayor. And thank you for my colleagues' perspectives of all of this prior to my speaking to you right now about it. I'll get to what needs to change, but I also want to get to the mindset that needs to change to get us to the change itself. And that is that we take a shared position of action. After we collaborate and we talk, the talk has to generate to the action that we need to take in order to get to solving the problem to a solution. And that means that for everything that we've said, going back to pre-pandemic actions of operating or mindset of operating in our silos and thinking that everything is okay and collaborating when it's convenient and those days are past. Today, we can't get to a shared community of action without those collaborations and without the partnerships. Let me share some interesting statistics with you. Century graduates over 400 healthcare workers a year. That includes nursing, rad techs, EMTs, orthotics and prosthetics, dental hygiene assistants, dental assistants, medical assistants, you name them, and in non-credit nursing assistants. The issue is that we are not a manufacturing company where we can just ramp up the line and say, here's some more. Our other challenges are we are funded through tuition and appropriation, about equal share in that, and then some entrepreneurial funding that goes into our entire budget. We are funded to the level of the current operations that we deliver. In order to build scale and increase capacity, these partnerships need to look like, what do you need that we can provide? And how can we partner together to get to the outcome that we all desire? There is no president or educational leader that does not want to fulfill the workforce in this state, in this region, in this country. Our challenges are in public institutions such as Century and Normandale and all the other 36 or 35 colleges and universities within the Min-State system, is the amount of money we need to build that capacity. And we can't do it, and it remains a conversation without an intentional conversation toward the action. And we're having those conversations right now with our local healthcare providers, how we can earmark students in an earn to learn, how we can talk about what our real needs are in order to get the capacity. Let me share another statistic. There's no shortage of interest in students who want to be healthcare workers. Every admitting time that we have, fall and spring, we have over 350 eligible qualified students to get into our nursing and other programs. What we don't have are seats. We can only seat 60 of them at Century. And we're one of the largest because we do not have the funds to build the capacity. So until we're ready to have those conversations, we don't have a solution.
That's fair. Thank you for making a solid point there. I think we're going to shift now to Ms. Knoll, and it sort of plays off of what you've started to say here, which is it's become increasingly accepted that having providers that better represent the populations in our communities generates better outcomes for everyone. I think I see a lot of head nodding, so I think we're in agreement. But according to a 2018 study by the American Association of Medical Colleges, only about 5% of doctors identify as Black, 5.8% as Hispanic, and over 56% identified as white. What is the role of an organization such as Mayo Clinic in working to address these gaps and create a more equitable profession? And perhaps if you're done, Ms. Millender might want to say something about that too. I see she's anxious to add her. So Ms. Knoll?
Sure. So I'd like to start by saying that Mayo is absolutely committed to creating an inclusive environment for our patients and for our healthcare professionals. And this type of environment, one where differences are valued and disparities are eliminated, allows our staff to be more innovative and productive and deliver culturally competent care, as you were getting at there, Mayor. It also enhances our research, improves the education that we can provide to our students, and ultimately helps us deliver the world-class patient-focused care that we strive to provide. So along those lines, Mayo has committed $100 million over the next 10 years to further diversity and inclusion initiatives across our campuses. And 50% of that commitment is earmarked for recruiting and retaining a diverse workforce, including our physicians, nurses, and supervisors, trying to pull from more underrepresented groups. And as a leader in healthcare, it's important that Mayo works to establish that global standard of what it means to be anti-racist and open and trying to recruit these different populations. So we have several initiatives underway to address it. And I won't go into great detail, but all of our efforts are being tracked by data and analytics. So we're really trying to hold ourselves accountable for achieving those goals. And I think bottom line is that we need industry-leading organizations like Mayo Clinic to champion efforts like this, because hopefully other institutions can leverage these types of programs as they design their own initiatives. And in my mind, if organizations like Mayo don't take these things on, who will? And I think we all definitely agree that it's time for a big change.
Thank you. And it looks like we are getting really short on time. So I'll ask one more wrap-up question, and you'll have to weave in anything you wanted to add into this and still allow us to end on time. What do you see as the critical role of healthcare in helping to create both economic growth and equity, not just for Minnesota, but across the nation? Let's start with Mr. C.
Well, I think that understanding that health in all of its manifestations, physical health and mental health and social health and economic health, are really interwoven in terms of how we build our cities, how we build our communities, and how we invest into the future. And I think, like, if the pandemic reminds us how connected all of these things are and how our responses have to be equally connected.
Thank you for that. Ms. Knoll?
Yeah, I say on the economic side, Mayo looks at innovation as a big component of it. So spurring local, national, international growth through innovation is a key part of what we do. So we sustain accelerators and scale our inventions and tender seed funding, sponsorships, things like that. So we think that's kind of the basic foundation for enhancing these communities and the economic growth that we're looking for. And then on the equity side, I'd say that I think everybody here would agree that equity in healthcare is critical for everybody in the US and across the globe. And Mayo has sites in all 3 states and serves patients from all 50 states, not to mention 140 countries. So our goals apply to advancing equity for all of these patients from those regions and not just Minnesota.
Wonderful. Mr. Frosch?
On the critical role of healthcare, it has healthcare as an employer, jobs. It was mentioned that Mayo is the largest employer in the state of Minnesota. A different health system is the largest employer in the Minneapolis-St. Paul metro. And so that's the path to economic opportunity. We've talked today that there are thousands and thousands of jobs that are going to be created, in just the next few years. And we need to, accelerate our efforts to move people in that direction.
Thank you for that. Ms. Melander.
Well, I think that we continue to have open and honest conversations about the lived experiences of many different races, genders, ethnicities, socioeconomic conditions of many people that make up our state, make up our region, make up our cities, and make up our country. I think that we also use a no one size fits all solution because where you're located regionally and within a state or country, it looks different. So making sure that we're open to viewing things differently than we have before combines with that change that you're talking about, Melissa, of all the investment that Mayo Clinic is putting into it. Let's not miss the people dynamics and like I said, the lived experiences of people. The other thing that's important is what we said earlier. Healthcare is wellness. Wellness is healthcare. It's all interwoven and is not interchangeable in this space and outside of it. And we must also get information to disparage or underserved communities so that they are aware of the work that Mayo and all of the other organizations are doing. Because without that communication, it is not an information, it is not possible for communities to see what you're doing, much less use what you're doing or even know what you're doing to try to help bridge the gap and mitigate the disparities that exist in our region, state,
Thank you
nation.
so much, for wrapping us up with those comments. And I just want to say one thing I heard here and I've heard throughout this whole event is innovation. And we want Minnesota to be a place for innovation. We certainly, in my community, look to Mayo Clinic and Destination Medical Center for a continued atmosphere of innovation, and it's what's going to drive our continued success. So with that, I want to thank the panelists for joining me today and pass this off to Max.
And if everyone can just hold for 1 second, we're going to take a quick picture. Smile. Perfect.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. It's a pleasure to see all of you again. Kim, Patrick, Peter, Angelia, and Melissa. I mean, I have a chance to meet pretty much most of you. I think Melissa is the only one, but again, I'm sure that we'll have a chance. And again, I just want to state once again how much do I feel special with this project, because not only as a regional director, but I had personal involvement in conducting some meetings and opening in a market that seemed a little bit far away from our headquarters in Miami, but at the end of the day has proved to be one of the most successful, and we're so happy to come this year and looking forward already for the next one. I want to take advantage to as well to update you on how many people have been RSVPing for this event, 800, which is probably a record during this pandemic. So I'm glad to make sure to know that so many people have been able to RSVP, and we've been having a fantastic, totally amazing attendance. So kudos to that. Also, I think it's a good moment to answer the third poll that should be popping up anytime on your screens. And we encourage you to participate so we can gauge the temperature again. There it is on the following topic. And this is a fun one. Which of the following activities makes you feel like a true Minnesotan? I guess it should be easy for you guys. So please go ahead and start answering. In the meantime, don't forget to check out our other platforms that Abby mentioned in the opening statement, or Invest Insights video platform, the Invest Insights podcast. In this platform, we interview high-level CEOs on a variety of topics, from cryptocurrency to creativity throughout a pandemic, the Great Resignation, and retaining talent, and more. Season 5 is going to be filmed very soon in March and released shortly thereafter on our YouTube channel. So you can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your audios. As the poll is closing, I'd like to introduce our second keynote speaker, Tim Welsh, Vice Chair of US Bank, and a renowned leader for his involvement in developing the region into a tech hub and for promoting a more diverse, equal, and inclusive community. Hi, Tim. Always a pleasure to see you. Please turn on your video. I know that you already did, and microphone. Thank you for being being with us here, and I'm so happy to see that caps collection growing. I'm sure that you have. I see the
Exactly.
Bengals there. They didn't make it, unfortunately. Maybe Minnesota will be the next year. So I'll pass on the ball to you.
Juan, thank you. It is really a privilege to be with all of you, and a huge thanks, Juan, to you and all at Capital Analytics for the creation of this, not just this conference, but this whole focus on invest in Minneapolis and St. Paul. As you know, as you and I have been talking about this, this is a really important effort, and I really am grateful for you and your team's insights about our region and your interest in helping us continue to be a very vibrant community for everybody. And so thank you for that. You know, as I think about and reflect on our community, a couple of things that strike me, and I want to go back to pre-pandemic first to just start this conversation. If you reflect on where we were pre-pandemic, and I realize that for so many of us, it's even hard to get your head around that. But, you know, we were on almost every list of great places to live, right? And great places to do business. And, you know, it was very, very common for us to be recognized as just a fabulous place. And I think we are. That's why we all live here and celebrate it so much. And if you dug underneath it, what was true pre-pandemic was that so much of that robustness came from the diversity of our economy, the fact that we have so many different sectors here that are vibrant, financial services and healthcare, consumer products, you can go on and on, incredibly diverse economy. And as just been talked about in this panel, innovation, huge element of what was making us successful. Not to mention the fact that it's a wonderful environment and the people are generous. We are consistently among the most philanthropic states. So there was a lot to celebrate. And we also knew pre-pandemic that we had some of the most significant racial disparities of anywhere in the country. And nobody was satisfied with that. And many, many people were working hard to address those disparities. You then look to the pandemic and you say, oh my goodness, so many of our strengths really helped us during that period. You know, you think about innovation and you look at what companies like 3M did with masks and Medtronic with their amazing ventilator system that they open sourced so that everybody could have ventilators. You think about the extraordinary efforts that healthcare workers across the state and so many other frontline colleagues, including mine from US Bank, who kept the financial services operations running, who took care of people in healthcare facilities. All of that was just extraordinary, right? And we know that less than 5 miles from my house, George Floyd was murdered. And that was just one of too many incidents. We've had many others recently where we know that the disparities that we had talked about and we understood that we needed to really step up our game, that we needed to do something that was fundamentally different, work in different ways, collaborate in different ways, get different voices to the table so that we could make progress and be the region to which all of us aspire to live. And one of the things I'm so excited about is that as we move forward, we have used this moment, this real opportunity of frankly coming to grips with some of the challenges that have faced us. We have used this to really be bold in thinking about how we move forward. And I think, as I look at it with my hat at US Bank, my hat in the community with Greater MSP and other organizations, one of the things that I am most excited about is that we have clearly said that we want to be a region where every single person can thrive. Every single person can achieve their potential. Every single person has an opportunity to be their best self. That's the region we want to be. Some people call this inclusive economic growth. I think of it as a place where we are all proud to call this home, every single one of us. And what I've been really inspired by in the last couple of years is not just the relentless intensity of the shaping of this vision, the belief that this must be the kind of community that we create together. But there is real action, right? In a way that I've never seen. People are stepping up in new ways, working in new ways, collaborating with new groups to make real progress on this. You just think about some of the examples. One of the things we've been proud to do at US Bank is invest more than $100 million in communities in the last couple of years to create what we call Project Access, where we can help people get, particularly those in the Black community or other underrepresented communities, have access to homes, get easier to get a mortgage. Countless commitments like that. We are one of just many, many organizations across this region that have said, we are going to create this economic growth that is inclusive. We're going to make this a community where everybody can thrive. There is real action on the part of so many entities. And in addition to that action, there is a relentless, profound belief that we must do this together. And that commitment is truly inspiring. I'm also seeing us working in new ways. One of the things I've been really inspired by is how the initiative called United by Black, Powered by All has come together housed by the African American Leadership Forum, is now a place where critically important Black voices are helping us design solutions for the Black community, and that we're taking this model of making sure that everybody's voice is heard, and that we are using that across the community to make sure that we're together collaborating to design solutions that all of us can work toward, that really truly serve the needs of the communities we want to serve, right? So we're fundamentally working in new ways, listening to new voices, again, with that relentless commitment. Another example, we were just talking in this healthcare panel about new collaboration models. I'm seeing that everywhere. 80 companies have come together under the coalition of the Minnesota Business Coalition for Racial Equity. Never been done before. How can all companies work together on racial justice? You think about what happened with the story of First Independence Bank, the first Black-owned bank to come to this community. It's an amazing story of how 5 banks in this region, including US Bank, Wells, Bank of America, Bremer, and TCF, now Huntington, how we all came together and said, we want to invite a Black-owned bank to this community so that we can better serve every single person in this community, right? That has never happened anywhere in the country. And so while we have had our challenges, what I am inspired by is the fact that we have a very clear vision that we're going to create an environment where every single person can thrive, where our economic growth is inclusive, that everybody has a chance, and that we want to create a community where all of us are proud to call this home. And that is not just words, it is real action. It is steps that people are taking every day, acting in new ways with a relentless commitment, a relentless drive to collaborate, innovate, hear new voices, do things differently. This is a journey. We're all on it together. But I personally believe that we can do this, and that there's so many on this call and countless others who are committed to making this the kind of community that all of us are so proud of, where every single person can achieve their full potential. And I'm really grateful to all of you for the work that you're doing on this, the commitment you have to that inclusiveness. And I know that there is nothing that can stop us from achieving this. It will be, we must continue to work to create the kind of environment that all of us are proud to call home. And Juan, I just want to thank you again and all the team at Capital Analytics for your interest in our community, your support for what we're doing, your willingness to talk about and listen and understand our story. You are a partner in helping create the environment that we all want to call home. So thank you so much. And I will turn it back to the Capital Analytics folks.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Tim, thank you very much for your kind words. Very well spoken and very much appreciated. I also want to say thank you to all of our panelists. It was a really great event today and wouldn't be possible without your support and participation. For all of you that I haven't had the pleasure to meet, my name is Keegan Mccombe. I'm the Executive Director on this Invest Minneapolis-St. Paul project, as well as our up-and-coming project, Invest Cincinnati. And for those of you that I have met, thank you again. It's been a real pleasure to work with you to complete our inaugural edition of our annual business report. When I took over this project mid-2021, it seemed a fairly daunting task, but I did quickly learn what it means to be Minnesota nice. Everyone was very welcoming with open arms and really exuberated a feeling of collaboration, community, and involvement. The amazing leaders who I met with during this journey while putting together this report were incredibly supportive, receptive, and excited about our work. I am humbled by what we've been able to create and accomplish within Minneapolis-St. Paul's business community this year. Minnesota and Minneapolis specifically have had some pretty real challenges throughout the pandemic, but with such a cohesive community, I'm positive the region will emerge so much stronger for it and really become a beacon of development and equity across the board. Despite everything, the region has been made stronger, which subsequently led to this publication, as well as this event becoming a real success. We've had an incredible audience today of over 700, 800 plus registered attendees, made up of executives, businessmen, businesswomen. And I think it speaks not only to the necessity of what we do now more than ever, business intelligence, to attract and promote investments into the MSP region, but also the character of this business community, to lean in, to rise above, and to be the great city that we know it is. So thank you all for that. I would also like to share the answers of today's polls. For the first one, what do you think the Twin Cities' immediate priorities should be? Pretty, not a very tight race, if I'm being honest. At 12%, better public transportation with new and current expansions. 16% of the vote got improved infrastructure with roads, bridges, and river management. And way ahead, 72%, the winner is affordable housing and public safety. For the second poll, aside from increasing revenues and profits, which of the following is the top priority for your organization in 2022? This one was a bit tighter, coming in last, 24%, returning to the office. 37% increasing total staff numbers, and in the lead at 39%, increasing diversity and leadership. Then the third poll, which one of the following activities makes you feel like a true Minnesotan? At 10%, other. Another 10%, hustling along the big city in Minneapolis's world famous skyway system. In second place, at 38%, heading up to the lakeside cabin for a well-earned getaway. And 42%, again, attributing to the communal environment of Minnesota, helping your neighbor shovel out their snowed-in car on an early winter's morning. So thank you for everyone who participated today in these polls. And then again, I want to shout out our incredible sponsors for making today possible. All the gold sponsors, Mr. Ron Konechny over at Digi International, a leading tech company operating across the globe, headquartered in MSP. Mr. Adam Elliott over at ID Insight, a solutions-oriented tech organization helping companies reduce friction and increase efficiencies. Ms. Lily Hall over at Knock Inc., creative marketing firm helping organizations reach their potential through strategic insight and a realization of capability and process. And then lastly, Mr. Jamie Wohl at RSM, a leading accounting firm not only in the country, but the world, and one of the largest in Minnesota. Thank you all. You guys are all prevalent thought leaders within the market. We can't thank you enough for your incredible support today. And to wrap up, our team will be sharing a link after this conference so everyone can access the digital edition of the publication complimentary. And while the Minneapolis-St. Paul might be newly released, we have just begun research on our newest projects, Invest Cincinnati, as well as Invest Dallas-Fort Worth. So definitely check those out. Stay tuned for more information. You can register for our newsletters as well at capitalanalyticsassociates.com, or you can reach out to me personally. at kmccombe@capitalaa.com. That's KMCCOMBIE@capitalaa.com. Lastly, one more time, I just want to say thank you all again for joining us today, for making this publication possible, this event possible, and to our presenters, moderators, and panelists for your insightful words, and our sponsors for supporting our efforts. Thank you all one more time, and have a great rest of your afternoon.